Welcome to the Eagle Heritage Project and the Embry-Riddle podcast of the Riddle Report. We are here in the podcast studio of Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, located on the flight line of the Daytona Beach, Florida campus. My name is Bill Thompson, Executive Director of Engagement Initiatives and Heritage Project at the Daytona Beach, Florida campus for Embry-Riddle. Today, we're going to talk about our history, and I am pleased to introduce our guest, Dr. Jenny Harding from the UK. Dr. Jenny Harding will talk about how Embry-Riddle was involved starting in 1941 with the British Flight Training School, especially number 5. I think this history is very pertinent for Embry-Riddle because not only did we train the British airmen, but also this was something that John Paul Riddle was true to his heart and was something he was heavily involved in and really was part of his dynasty as we looked back in our 100-year history, but especially going back to 80 years as we talk about World War II. So Dr. Jenny Harding, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bill.
And we have talked about we've talked about the Hap-Arnold scheme, and we've talked about both different sides and the cadets coming over. So I think the next question was going to be, as we were looking at it, how was the training or how did the cadets get here as we talk about those two schemes and what was involved?
The cadets in the early stages got here usually in a convoy, and they sailed from either Glasgow or Liverpool in the main, and they would come in a convoy and they went over to Halifax in Canada, which is in Nova Scotia in Canada. At that point, they would then take a train, and it would either be to Toronto or to RAF Moncton, which was in New Brunswick. And from there, they would take a train to wherever it was that they were destined to go. So it wasn't just the cadets who were destined to come here to Florida. A full shipload of people, a troop ship full of people would come. They would go to Canada, they would go to other places in America. But the cadets we're particularly talking about would get on a train. If they were from Toronto, in the early days, they came via Sebring and Chattanooga. That's probably the wrong way around, actually. It probably should be Chattanooga, then Sebring. And then they came...
Sebring, Florida, we're talking about. Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Absolutely, yes. And then in the case of the cadets at Clewiston, they came to Clewiston by train. The ones that went to Arcadia would presumably go to Arcadia by train.
And for those of you who are not familiar with the geographic Florida topographic maps, Clewiston, Florida is just to the south of Lake Okeechobee. And that is so that everybody has an idea. This is the center of Florida. This is Everglades, actually, as we look at it. Excuse me. And as we look at, that's where the cadets would end up. And then obviously we're going to talk about some of their training and what they did. But can you give me, so I'm a cadet, say, and okay. I'm now how long am I on a troop ship? And sometimes it was the Queen Mary, was it not? Or some sort of...
The later cadets came over. They converted a number of liners, luxury liners, into troop ships. So the Queen Mary, the Queen Elizabeth, and quite a number of other ones would come over. They went into New York. And then quite often, the cadets would then have to go up to Canada to then come down to wherever it was they were destined for. In our case, we're talking about Clewiston.
Because, again, the U.S. was not involved in a war at this time.
Not when my father came over.
This was a way that the U.S. could support,
yes,
I'll say quietly, at that particular point in time. So now you're a cadet. You come in, and we're talking about the U.K. So where are we talking about? What are we talking about country-wise?
We're talking about the 4 nations of the United Kingdom. So the cadets came from Scotland, England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And there were also a few cadets that came from the Republic of Ireland as well.
So we have groups of cadets who are now brought together on a troop ship, learning to be comrades and coming from times when food was rationed.
Absolutely.
Everything was rationed. So now they get to Canada and then maybe to Florida. Can you tell me maybe what that was like?
I think it was amazing. So I can tell you about my father coming over.
Please.
He came on a troop ship to Halifax. He went on a train to Toronto and then Chattanooga, Sebring, Clewiston. And the hospitality in Toronto was amazing. They were taken all sorts of places. They were taken to Niagara Falls. And they were given food that they hadn't seen for years. They were given bananas, they were given oranges, they were given a really great time. They probably thought how wonderful this is. Then they got on the trains and they came to Clewiston, and they were given fantastic hospitality. I have to say that the people of Florida, of Clewiston, and not just Clewiston, a big area from Fort Myers through to Miami, they gave them so much, and the cadets were always grateful for that.
Yeah. And also, in a time, they would stop in New York City, and they would get new suits or get different. So they were all in suits, and
they were all in suits. So they stopped in New York City on the way back quite often. So when they were in Canada, they could have been in two places in Canada. They could have been in RAF Moncton. The earlier cadets went to Toronto. That is when they were given a grey suit, because America was a neutral country. In Canada, they could wear their uniforms. They could walk about in uniform. Canada is part of the Commonwealth. They were at war as well. America wasn't. So in America, they could wear their uniforms on camp, but they didn't always wear them very much, perhaps just for church parade and that sort of thing. If they went off the camp, it was civvies.
Okay.
And that's what the grey suits were for.
So the time period, again, for everybody in our audience, the time period we're talking about is...
The time period we're talking about, the 5 BFTS, British Flying Training School, started in July 1941. And so we're talking about the period from July 1941 to December 1941.
Okay.
After that, America was at war, so they could wear their uniforms.
They could wear their uniforms. And as we talk about Clewiston and Acadia, I think at this point, can we talk about how John Paul Riddle was involved in this project?
Yes, it was John Paul Riddle's project. He was the person, the Embry-Riddle company, but it was John Paul Riddle that did the work, went out and got the contract for number 5 British Flying Training School. So once it had been agreed through the Lend-Lease conditions, there were 6 flying schools arranged. The one in California, 2 in Oklahoma, 1 in Texas, 1 in Arizona, 1 in Florida. Is that 5?
That's 5, but we had 2, so that would be 6.
No. We only had 1 in Florida.
I mean 2. You said
there were 2. There were 2 in Oklahoma.
Oh, Oklahoma. Yes.
There was California, Texas, 2 in Oklahoma, 1 in Arizona, and Florida. Yep. Yes, that's actually slightly the wrong order. The number is the order in which they opened. So number 5 in Florida was the 5th to open.
Gotcha.
Okay.
We got through the math, correct?
We've done the maths. We've got the right number of training schools. Yes. So each of these training schools was very similar. They had to have the same size, the same shape, the same number of density of buildings. They had to have a swimming pool. They had to have mess rooms. They had to have sporting facilities, all this sort of thing on the site. And so it was very prescriptive. And various people would put in to get the contract. So here in Florida, it was John Paul Riddle that tendered for the contract, and he got it. And these schools also had to be built very, very quickly.
Yes.
Because you've got young men, the RAF needed pilots. There was an urgency about this. And so he got the contract, I think, in either late May or early June 1941, and immediately went out and tried to seek for somewhere to have it. And I believe that Sebring was the original first choice. And that didn't work out, and I'm not quite sure why. And then they came to Clewiston. So they started building Clewiston then. But when the first 50 cadets came out for Course 1, it wasn't ready. So they had to go to Carlstrom Field in Arcadia, which was also an Embry-Riddle organisation field.
Very good. So now we're in John Paul Riddle. Everybody loved John Paul Riddle.
Everybody loved John Paul Riddle. He was quite often known as Boss Riddle, and that wasn't just by his staff. The cadets knew him as Boss or Boss Riddle. And he was so popular. He was loved by the staff. And the cadets could just go up and talk to him, and he was so friendly with them. They thought he was great. And he loved his cadets as well. He loved the cadets that were in Clewiston.
That's part of John Paul Riddle's legacy and he carries through today. Anyone who's met him through all of his years always said he was someone you remembered. He was someone who greeted you with a smile, someone who greeted you by name,
Yes.
oftentimes, and was always interested in what you were doing to his passing. But I'm going to talk about his passing then.
Okay.
So we know that half of his ashes were flown over the Atlantic Ocean, but can you tell us where John Paul Riddle's cemetery plot and half his ashes are?
Yes, it's in Oak Ridge Cemetery in Arcadia.
And it's Arcadia, Florida.
It's Arcadia, Florida, yes.
And he's alongside
23 cadets who were killed while they were training to be pilots here in Florida. So one of them was at Carlstrom Field, was part of the Arnold scheme. He's there. One of them was an Arnold scheme cadet that was no longer, had been at Carlstrom, had actually been at Riddle Field for a little bit as well, but was then at Gunter Field, Alabama, and was over here in Florida with friends when he was killed in a car crash. Okay. The other 21 cadets were all from Clewiston. And they are there. They are at Oak Ridge Cemetery in the British plot. It's a plot that is overseen by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, and all the 23 have identical headstones. John Paul Riddle requested that after he died, half his ashes were buried there, if that was possible, alongside the boys that he was so fond of.
The boys.
The boys.
And when you look at the photos, you see the boys, but I want to come back to this for one more second. So we talk about Commonwealth graves, and real quickly, I believe it's British soil.
It's British soil.
Because in the UK, or the British terminology, you bury those where they passed.
Absolutely, where they fell is the expression we use, yes.
Okay.
Yes, so they in the main, almost everybody who falls wherever they fall is buried where they fall. So if people were at home and they did die at home for whatever reason, they would be buried back in the UK. But everybody else are buried where they fell.
And every year on Memorial Day, there is a ceremony at Oak Ridge Cemetery.
Yes.
Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so this is the ceremony is organised by the Rotary Club of Arcadia, and they've been doing it since 1956. So apart from 2020, which was the COVID year, they have organised a service every single year since then, which is absolutely amazing, and so grateful to them. And every year it is broadly the same. People turn up. Somebody is asked to give the guest speech. The flags are raised.
Yes.
The anthems are sung.
Yes.
And in the middle of the service, each cadet is called out by name, as is John Paul Riddle. And the cadets get a flag and a poppy wreath put on their grave by one of the people who's attending the service. And organisations in Florida also bring wreaths. So I know Embry-Riddle bring a wreath, and they are called out as well. And so the wreaths are there, and it's amazing. And it's now 80 years since Riddle Field closed.
Yes. And
people still come and remember. And this year, 2025, I would say perhaps 150 people, maybe.
At least 150.
At least, could be towards 200 people were there, which is incredible that people want to come and remember.
And there's new people every year to honor the Brits.
Yes.
And as they go through it. But it's also, sometimes it's the family members, and as we go from there. This is a little bit longer than we wanted to talk, but one of the things, there's a newsletter that goes out annually, correct? Or is it twice a year now? Or is it?
It's 3 times a year.
3 times?
Three times a year, yes, which I write. And I started writing it after the 5BFTS Association, which was an association of all the cadets and the instructors on both sides of the Atlantic, got together. That was disbanded in 2013. And after that, I was asked if I would write a newsletter to try and keep everybody who was involved with 5BFTS connected with each other on both sides of the Atlantic. And that has just grown from strength to strength. So there's 2 long ones a year, one in the spring and one in the autumn, and I do a shorter one at Christmas.
And so one of the things that I'd like to do is we'll do another podcast, if we could, on some of the stories of the cadets.
Yes.
If that would work. Because what we're talking about, I mean, boys.
They were there's 23 that died. Only one of them was over 21. They were 19, 20, 21, and one was 25. So they were boys.
And here for a short period of time, but the theater they were running into, they knew they were here. And one of the words that I heard someone say was, none of them had fear in their eyes. They came here, they did their flight training, they were there for their country, and they were fearless, knowing what was next.
Absolutely.
That's a powerful statement. So as we look at the future, and we'll come back and we'll do another episode on the lives of these young men if we can, and,
yes.
and your dad as
yes.
well. But the future, and is there a way someone can connect with us besides connecting with Embry-Riddle, where we have it on Scholarly Commons and the history that we have? But is there another way that someone can contact us to know more about BFTS, or should they just put it out there in a search and see what they see?
I think now put it out in a search.
Okay. And there will be people they can contact.
There'll be people, the search will bring up Riddlefield, it'll bring up Embry-Riddle, it'll bring up Clewiston. But if people are searching for a relative, usually their grandfather, great-grandfather, uncle, great-uncle now, they put the name in. If there's something that's been published about it through Scholarly Commons, it will come up in a search engine.
So, Jenny, this means a lot to you, partly because of your dad's involvement, but why do you continue to be involved with BFTS and let the world know? Why? What is your mission on this?
My mission is, my father was the archivist of the association for many, many, many years. When he couldn't do it really for much longer, I helped him pack up all the information to send it on to the next person who was going to do it. So I was asking a few questions about it. And then he couldn't drive, so I took him and my mother to various association meetings. And I got to meet a lot of the pilots who were cadets. And they talked so much about it. And I thought, this has got to be recorded. This is so important. And it is 80 years now. It's a very special year this year. It's 80 years since the war ended, as well as 80 years since Riddlefield ended. And so if we don't do something now to remember, it's all going to be lost. And I have sons, I have grandchildren, and they're interested, but not in the same way, because they weren't there to hear. They know their grandfather, they met their grandfather and great-grandfather and great-grandmother, but it's more remote, and this brings it home to them. Very
good. And the last thing I'd say is the Clewiston Museum also has a special exhibit on BFTS.
Yes.
And that is someplace else that someone can go and learn about and learn more about the subject, learn more about the cadets, and learn more about BFTS and Embry-Riddle and John Paul Riddle as well. And that's right. And if you put in Clewiston Museum into a search box, you bring up the museum and you've got the different sections, and it's got a big section on the pilots, the cadets. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we close this episode? I think I will just say thank you to America for what they did, because without America doing what they did do, and the hospitality and the kindness of American people to these young boys, because it was a very long way from home for them. A lot of them couldn't drive a car, but they could fly an aeroplane. They were a very, very, very long way from home, and people were so kind. And they knew they were going back. They knew why they were here, but it gave them just a little bit of something. And it's still there. It's lasted. And the reason we're here is because of that bond, of that connection. Absolutely. And I think that's the thing I want to say. Dr. Jenny Harding, thank you so much for joining us today on the Eagle Heritage Project podcast. And we will be coming back and learn more about some of the cadets in another episode. But thank you for the audience for joining us today on the Embry-Riddle Report podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.